You're listening to The Extra Real with Jared Brown
and Colin Ryan for a look at the bigger picture of film.
with films from around the world,
Through the decades,
from movies you know and love.
to movies you need to discover.
On this week's show, we take a look at the 1990 Western Quigley Down Under. In it, we're going to take a look at the plot synopsis, we're going to look at an overview of the production history, and after that we're going to take a look at things that stood out for both of us. Quigley Down Under follows an American sharpshooter who is recruited under the pretense of shooting dingoes at a cattle station in the 1870s in Australia, but when he gets there it transpires that it's to shoot aborigines instead. So after a series of unfortunate events, it basically turns into Die Hard in the outback. And to complete that circle, we've got Alan Rickman as the main antagonist, Elliot Marston. I suppose before we launch into any of the overview stuff, we've got a couple of confessions. This is like my millionth time watching this film. This is a film that I've come to, I suppose, really when I was quite young and back in the good old days of video. And I call him, this is your virgin watch of this film.
This is the first time I've seen it. I guess it happens with a lot of westerns though, because you're such a big fan.
Yeah.
That you might have seen some multiple times. And I do like westerns, but it's not like my genre or anything. So I always do enjoy these episodes though, where you're like, I've seen this film 25 times. You've seen it once. Let's see what our experiences are, you know?
Yeah.
But you've recommended this to me a lot of times down through the years. And,
Yeah.
It was good to finally see it.
That's one way of looking at it anyway. So let's look at it. Let's reserve any judgment until the end, because I still don't know. I still haven't actually asked you, did you like it or not? So let's get on to that later. So, but first, I just want to talk a little bit about just the an overview of the production itself before we even get there, and just to kind of give us a bit of a context around what's going on. So this is a project that had been offered to Tom Selleck, who plays Matthew Quigley in this, a couple of years before, and prior to that it had been optioned around to a couple of different stars, everyone from the likes of Steve McQueen. Harrison Ford was in there. I've heard Sean Connery was also offered it. So it's been kind of floating around since the 70s.
I've heard Clint Eastwood as well, actually.
And apparently Selleck was tied up with Magnum PI. It seems like a common thing for him. Around 85 when he was first offered it and couldn't do it. And I think around 88 he got the chance to come back to them and say, come here, is that still floating around? I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Different directors were in place to do it. Eventually it was directed by Simon Windsor, but it had at one stage in the mid 80s, Lewis Gilbert, you know, who did Educating Rita and lots of Bond films, was also in the running to do it. And you know, so it eventually got made and released roughly around the same time as Dances with Wolves, which led to it being christened in some of the press Dances with Dingoes. Of course,
and didn't the writer who was the writer? The original writer was John Hill, right?
Yeah.
But when Simon Windsor came onto it, wasn't it the case that this guy Ian Jones was brought in?
Yeah.
Because they had some of the kind of Australian parts completely wrong or something like that.
And that's it. And that it needed that polish, and you can see that. I think that's one of the things that Windsor brings to the film in general, is that it doesn't feel like a travelogue movie. You could imagine if it was an American or something like that, someone like that directing it, that it may have become like some sort of travelogue where you've got there aren't loads of shots of the animals and stuff like that where it becomes a curiosity piece. I'm thinking of films like the Fred Zinnemann's The Sundowners, where sequences of it feel like they got, you know, David Attenborough's stock footage and just rammed it in between. There are some shots of kangaroos, but there's not loads of like gratuitous here's something for the tourist stuff, which I think is handy. And that has
and it doesn't do that thing as well, where also, you know, when you watch Australian films and it's like it has to show like how hot it is and how humid it can be, and there's like bugs flying on people's faces and stuff like that. It doesn't do as much of that either.
No, not like The Proposition.
Yeah, no, nothing like The Proposition.
No. Which is grand. Nor does it do, like, I don't know if you've seen The Thornbirds, directed by Daryl Duke, but that mini series was shot entirely in America, and there's a couple of shots of kangaroos, which are clearly, it's like stock footage shoehorned in, and you can just see that the
Yeah.
landscape isn't quite right. Whereas this was shot in Western Australia, so around Warrnambool and Apollo Bay,
Apollo Bay. Yeah.
and also in the Northern Territory around Alice Springs. And like a lot of the cast, and there's a lot of cast and crew stories from experiences around Alice Springs. So we'll maybe deal with that later when we're talking about the cast. But yeah, so that's where it was roughly shot. So it's great that it was actually shot in the actual locations,
Yeah.
and or well, not in the actual locations, but actually in Australia, which helps.
Sure.
So that's that side of it. We've got loads to talk about. Also, I suppose just prior to doing this, Simon Windsor, I mean, couldn't be better placed to take this project on, in that he had done a lot of robust action and horse related pieces. So he was a producer on The Man from Snowy River in 1982. He was director of The Light Horseman, which is an energetic, exciting World War One picture, which was actually rehashed for young Indiana Jones episode. Took a big chunk of stock footage, which he directed as
He
well.
directed that, yeah.
Episode, and also, of course, Windsor directed Lonesome Dove, which was a huge hit. I mean, a massive, massive hit, multiple Emmys and all that sort of stuff. And often cited as one of the greatest westerns of the last 30 or so years, and greatest modern westerns. Western fans, I'm a big fan of it. It's a great piece of work, and like as of all of the Lonesome Dove miniseries, the first is the best. But also that ties slightly to the casting of Selleck, because prior to this, Windsor had tried to get him for Lonesome Dove to play the part of the ill-fated Jake Spoon, and that part went to Robert Urich instead. But of course, Selleck himself had a bit of a past in westerns. Yes, Magnum PI, and he obviously had the connection with Indiana Jones, which has its own connections with escapist adventure and stuff like that. But Selleck had starred in The Sackets in 1979, and also in The Shadow Riders, which was kind of an unofficial kind of sequel, but not really, to The Sackets, and not anywhere near as successful, despite having some of the same cast and a partnership with Sam Elliott in it. And would also go on to do more films with Windsor, all westerns. So he would do
Crossfire Trail was one, right?
Crossfire Trail, which is quite decent, and Monty Walsh, which is a good film, but it stands in the shadow of the classic 1970 original. And so Selleck and Windsor have a great relationship, and Windsor, generally speaking, I like his films, I like his action output. I think Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man is the one that I like the least. I think it's an atrocious film, which is a bit disappointing to say. But he also did Lightning Jack with Paul Hogan, which is watchable and entertaining in its own way. But so that's roughly where we begin with just the some of the production information and some of the information around the production team. So let's talk a little bit about the film. So from the point of view of the cast, what are we thinking here?
It's a strange one, isn't it, the cast? Because a lot of the two main leads, really. Well, taking out Alan Rickman, but I'm talking about more like Quigley and Crazy Cora.
Yeah.
When you're talking about Tom Selleck and Laura San Giacomo, you're actors that are kind of, to my knowledge anyway, I always think of them more as actors I've seen on TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
After this, so it's kind of a strange feeling seeing them, as leads in a film. But they do have great chemistry, and they do like work together really well. Also, it's kind of interesting to see baby Ben Mendelsohn jump in there as O'Flynn, which is a strange one, because I hadn't seen much of Ben Mendelsohn's earlier output.
Yeah.
So, and I hadn't read. I was looking through the cast list as I was watching this, and I was like, "Where's Ben Mendelsohn? I can't see him anywhere." And then, oh, the guy with the red hair.
And he's actually really good in it, to the point where he is retained
is.
to the final shootout, which is cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've also got Tony Bonner, who's another Australian actor that has cropped up in an awful lot of other Simon Windsor films, but also had been in international affairs type films since the since the early 70s, perhaps even earlier. But films like You Can't Win Them All with Charles Bronson, which was set in Turkey, and so he's been around the block,
look, doesn't he?
What?
He's a great look. He looks like he's chiseled out of granite or something. He's
Yeah,
absolute brilliant look on him. Yeah, he's great.
And then of course Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
Who is just this is kind of sandwiched between Die Hard and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Robin Hood, yeah.
And I've seen a few articles where they're like rating, oh, this is the Alan Rickman villain role you haven't seen or whatever. And for a lot of people that's the case. And I've seen it rated as the least of the three. And looking back at it yesterday, I was going initially I went, really? What? And then I looked at the film and I kind of went, he doesn't have as much screen time as he does have in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And even though he's got plenty of good one-liners in this, he doesn't have the same amount of screen time. So I was like, no. Yeah. And then Die Hard is the best of the three. So maybe just by a whisker, it's just below Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves for me. But he didn't really kind of wallow in this villainy much after this.
No, this was kind of his villain period, wasn't it? It was like strange, really, that he didn't. But he is great in this, and I do like, as you say, he isn't in it much.
No,
but sometimes that could be the greatness of a villain, that they're not in it much, but the kind of the shadow of the villain is always there, you know.
And one thing that this film has going for it, and it's a big criticism that I have about a lot of films, is that the villain is properly villainous. He's a nasty piece of stuff. He's also a buffoon, but he's properly villainous, which helps.
No, completely. Straight from his introduction, you know, this guy's not good news, you know.
Marston is a bastard.
Really
exactly. Yeah. And it's a great introduction. Definitely. Like the fact even I love films where we're talking about a character before we meet them, so it's built up. We're talking about Marston's land. We're 2 days on it already, all of that sort of stuff. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I think it's about 20 minutes into the film before you actually meet him, isn't it?
It is. And maybe that could be, like, it's something that I have felt is a problem in the pacing of the film. In that, if I have one criticism, it could be that it takes 20 to 30 minutes for the film to really find its stride. And when it does, it kicks into a different gear again. Exactly. So, yeah, the cast is impressive. And even, I think, when Selleck was cast... like he kind of went, like one of the things that he had was that he wanted the weapons to be authentic to the time, that he didn't want them to predate the period that they should have been in or whatever, to be anachronistic to the time period and stuff. So he picked out some of the weapons and stuff like that, and had something to do with the commissioning of the rifles. They had 3 different rifles on set. One as a backup, one for shooting, one for doing any kind of club work or any of that sort of stuff.
And this is the thing, I didn't realize Selleck was a member of the NRA.
Yeah.
And this isn't to go against him as well. This isn't to be like, oh, he's a big MAGA head or he loves Trump or anything like that. I mean, he actually isn't on either side. He's not a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
But he does like guns.
Yeah.
And, you know, he is into them. And I didn't realize that. Now, I feel like the gun, like the Sharps rifle or whatever, it's a character in the movie, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge part. Like it's an impressive part of the film, like, because the action sequences are well executed. Like, there's real impact when those bullets whip through guys or knock them off their feet. And even when he sets up the gun, like that's brilliant. I love it because it just builds this tension because he's slowly making it. I thought that was amazing. Yeah, it's great, and the hair trigger and all of that extra stuff. It's brilliant. And like another thing that he did, that Selleck did, was pick out his own costume. So he brought that to it, and I think that was very much in his mind, that, you know, the type of character that he's playing is very much an archetypal Western hero, a la someone like John Wayne and something like Hondo. And so you've got this broad shoulders, kind of 6'4" type persona, and that was something that was important to him, that everything looked right. And he looks quite, like, I don't want to say he looks unique, but the costuming is it's memorable. You remember the hat, you remember the blue shirt, to the point when you recognize, at the end you notice that it's been changed to red or whatever. But
yeah,
he looks distinct in amongst the characters, and that's important.
What I liked about the character, in a sense, I felt at the start he was going to be almost infallible, but he's very much kind of a mortal being. We see him get beaten up 2 or 3 times, and I kind of did like that element, because sometimes with films like this, where you have this kind of hero who comes in from a faraway place, and he's almost like this kind of savior style character, and that they almost never get hit or hurt or anything.
Yeah,
and it was really kind of refreshing to see that in this, that he does get caught, he does get kind of beaten around the place. That was really good.
I do feel like that one of the roles that Tom Selleck kind of missed out on was playing something like the Virginian, the Owen Wister character. He has this kind of noble Western hero in a way that, as I say, John Wayne, for the most part in his career, did have, or someone like Gary Cooper as well. So he is like an actor that existed 30 years too late. And very much became symptomatic of a lot of the TV westerns that emerged in the I suppose the 80s and the 90s, where they were kind of harking back to that classic 50s, in 40s and 50s type of western hero to an extent. So yeah, interesting from that point of view. And also something that apparently he also selected his horse. So like John Wayne always said, like, the horse needed to be like at least 16 hands. It needed to look the part, not be some sort of scrawny mule, So that's also just another little nugget. So with the rest of the cast, the cast general is pretty. It's a mixed bag, to be fair, but they all kind of inhabit their roles eventually to a certain extent. Like, I think the one that stands out for the most part for me is Laura San Giacomo, and that she's not instantly likable. She's a character that I've watched with other people and they've said, she's a bit annoying, but I love the way her character arc comes round. And I think there are some scenes where she has some serious emotional heft, and particularly the scene where she's talking about, smothering her own baby and stuff like that, and the scene with the dingoes, I think, is really well done.
That is I really enjoyed that scene, actually. And as you say, you do kind of find out her backstory and stuff like that, and you can understand a lot more why she is almost this kind of hysterical woman at the beginning. At first, I was the same. It did kind of annoy me. I was like, what is going on here? Why is she like this? And why does she keep calling him Roy? But over time, when the arc, she does have more. I think she has probably the most developed arc, really, of all the characters. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's talk about the actual story and the script and stuff like that. How did you find it overall?
The script, I had a few issues with.
Go on, hit me with them.
I did find that the fact that he just kind of took this job and traveled so far and didn't seem to have ask any questions was kind of like, I was like, that's a bit strange.
Yeah.
Also, one thing, but I think it was kind of, in a weird way, it's a weird one to have a gripe about, because in ways the film doesn't work if it's not there. But the rifle itself, it's always beside him. It's always beside him. Even when he gets kicked out of Marston's ranch and taken 2 days away, they leave him with the rifle. And I'm like, you see what this guy can do with this rifle. Why did you leave it with him? Do you know? That really, I was like, that was a bit strange to me. And I don't want to spoil the film or anything like that. People haven't seen it. But of course, the final kind of scenes, you know what I'm talking about, really.
So this is are you talking about kind of villains kind of talking their way into something where they could have, yeah. Okay.
And a scene slightly after that with a kind of element of magical realism. I thought it looked really cool. But I thought, in terms of how fast that happened, and I felt that scene I think they got that scene in because I was like, this looks visually really beautiful and stunning.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was actually needed.
Okay. Yeah. And look, I take all of those as criticisms, for me, as I say, maybe I'm immune to some elements of those, but the one I'm not immune to is maybe a pacing thing, in that it does maybe take a while to get going I take it totally from a character point of view. He seems pretty smart for the most part, But why the hell did he come so far without doing a little bit more research? But that's neither. Yeah, that's that. They're all pretty fair. For me, let's move. Okay, so let's move on to was there any other elements that stood out for you?
I did feel tonally at times there was a strange shift in things. There's a quite gruesome scene where these Aborigines are pretty much getting thrown off a cliff. And that was really kind of tough to watch. But then a few scenes later, the characters are kind of bantering back and forth again, and you're like, oh, this is just, I don't know if this fits for me, you know?
Okay.
So definitely I found the tone at times, it tries to be a lot of different things, I think. It tries to be so many different things. It tries to be like a classic Western. It tries to have kind of elements of magical realism. And I don't know if it all fits, you know?
Right. Okay. So what we have here is essentially, I feel like it's Die Hard in the Outback. Talk to me about those elements. Because I think those elements work. Like, the action is really crisply directed. Each bullet shot has real oomph. It's got that it's got Basil Polidorus riffing off the best elements of his RoboCop score. And
score is great, yeah.
It's pulsating stuff at times. So it opens with this kind of Elmer Bernstein-esque traveling piece where we see the ship sailing to Australia, and then you've got the action cues which are just thrilling. And you know, I just think it has those elements, and those elements, by God, do they work, you know? And it's got lashings of action. And as an action film, I feel like it definitely gets 2 thumbs up from me. How did it come across for you? Did you find it satisfying?
Film, it does. No, the action film elements are really good. I love the kind of climactic kind of shootout. I thought that was amazing. There's a scene where, you know, this certain type of shot is referred to as a Quigley.
Yeah, and that's
you get
something
2 people with one bullet.
Yeah.
And that's as you said, that was really cool. Like, there are, like, this is the thing about this film. I don't think, like, as a whole does it work for me. No, but the brilliant elements in it, the stuff that really does work. And I loved. When he's first introduced, when he comes off the ship and he's walking, and there's kind of this really cool kind of just kind of tracking shot behind him, and there's a few like that in the film. I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as I say, look, that's cool. Like, I think I've watched it to death, and I think it's purely the people I've watched it with would be people who are just like, all I want to watch is an action film. And as an action film, I think it really works. I do think, I definitely think from the point of view of the script and stuff, there are maybe pacing issues, there are definite character issues and stuff like that. But it depends on how, you know, 9 times out of 10, we're kind of watching these things just to watch something for the crack.
Exactly.
And I think on that level, it totally works. Now, a couple of other things that I've kind of come across, or just my other final thoughts on this.
This is like, I found this on Watch 13. What does someone think about this?
What?
You're like, I found this on watch number 13 of this film. What do people think about this?
Yeah, but it is a bit like that, actually. So, just random fact. Apparently, there's a shooting competition, and the winner of the women's section, it gets the Crazy Cora Award. So that's some random fact. Okay, it's a Quigley buffalo shooting competition or something, buffalo gun shooting competition. Interesting. So look, that's randomly interesting. The other thing I was kind of thinking about was, well, Australia, known for its bushranger sagas and stuff like that. So Mad Dog Morgan, Inn of the Damned, what else? Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith to an extent. And then you've got, so we've had those sort of films, and Quigley's kind of slotted in, and obviously things like kind of the poetic kind of stuff like Man from Snowy River, Return from the Man from Snowy River. So very much adventure orientated pieces. And actually, when I talk about the adventure elements, I'm thinking of things like, you know, if you look at, there's some posters that were done for this film, and they look like Indiana Jones posters from the time, but they were done by a guy.
You think they had?
Yeah, same guy.
Do you think they had Harrison Ford on his head at one stage? They mocked it up.
Who knows? But it was the same guy that did the some of the artwork, Drew Struzan, who's done like a lot of like everything from Back to the Future 3, which is interesting because there was debates on what kind of outfit to put Michael J. Fox in to begin with. So a lot of so not the standard DVD box. That's just a kind of random stuff. But I think that some of the artwork from the time, we'll share it on the Extra Real page, Facebook page.
Sure.
Was done by Drew Struzan, who I think is kind of, he's semi-retired now, but or if not totally retired, but still quite active. You know, popping up on things like Twitter and stuff. So, but his work, like from the 70s and 80s, is just so impressive. Like if you look at any of the like classic artwork for a lot of films that people love, it's Drew Struzan, and so that's interesting to me. And the other thing is just putting this in its place, I suppose, from the point of view of Australian films that have come since. So like we've seen a lot more serious outback, I wouldn't even call them adventures, outback dramas, films like The Proposition, films like The Sweet Country, dealing with the treatment of Aboriginals and stuff. And there's a new one with David Wenham, The Furnace, is coming out. And I'm thinking to myself, like, look, yes, there were serious films where, you know, the Australian New Wave had looked at, you know, serious aspects of the treatment of Aborigines in The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, We Have the Never Never, and stuff like that. But I have a feeling that this is a great opportunity for the Australians to look inward, but on an international level, where they're able to look at that issue and on the treatment of Aborigines and of those elements of genocide. So I think it's an important film, that it's something that maybe it doesn't get the credit for, because there are, as you highlighted, some massacre sequences of Aborigines. And it does kind of put it in a similar zone as well to American westerns of the 50s, like Devil's Doorway, like Broken Arrow, which deal with the treatment of Indians. So I think it kind of, there's a lot of different elements in it, but I think what it does do is it puts it on a plate in a similar way to Dances with Wolves, in a similar way to Last of the Dogmen, but I think in a more entertaining and a more successful way than Last of the Dogmen, and at least in some ways on par with Dances with Wolves, which very much deals with, obviously, the treatment of Indians. So, well, it's more of a side element to Quigley. I think it does offer up an interesting element on the debate of it, to present it to an international audience in a mainstream piece, but at least it gets the debate out there. And I know at the time when Alan Rickman was interviewed by Bobby Wygant, that he was asked about, you know, did you have much interaction with the Aborigines and stuff? And, you know, you can see in the film he doesn't share too many scenes apart from his butler. And but he was saying that on set, because I think they shot up in Alice Springs, that they got lots of Aborigine extras from around the country, and that they came in busloads, and that they would put on corroborations and perform their dances and tell stories. And he said it was actually quite an emotional period for some of them, because they would get homesick and they would actually go on walkabouts and stuff like that. But he got to know some of them. He said, I suppose his reaction was that they were very friendly people and so on and so forth, but he said, you know, you can only speak in a very general sense. But he didn't really have any major direct connections with them. But I thought that was interesting.
Wasn't it one of the reasons he took on this film was because he hadn't been to Australia, and he
exactly
was like, I just want to go to Australia, but you know,
reason enough,
exactly.
Cool to see Ben Mendelsohn. I mean, recently I rewatched The Year My Voice Broke, which I would highly recommend to people. He plays a kind of a dysfunctional juvenile delinquent, really, in that film, and his performance is really, really nuanced in it. And
he's in that, like Noah Taylor's in that with him.
Yeah,
right?
it's great.
They get confused for each other a lot, right? Because they look quite similar.
Do they? I suppose they do a bit.
I think
now.
when they were younger.
I think when they were younger, they kind of, if you see them, well, maybe Mendelsohn looks the same stature that Noah Taylor was, but in The Year My Voice Broke, he seems stockier than Taylor. But yeah, I can see it in particularly in Quigley, actually, because he seems to have either lost weight or slimmed down or whatever. And of course, Mendelsohn, like, you know, has gone on to play numerous villains. He was great in Star Wars.
He's in everything.
He's in everything. He's in lots of things.
He's in everything. You know, he's like 5 or 6 films a year.
Yeah.
And so it was strange for me to see him here, because I feel like I only know him as an actor in his like late 40s, 50s kind of thing. But it was really cool. It's always, I love kind of when these kind of actors just pop up, you know.
Yeah. Was there anything else actually that stood out for you?
Not really, I guess. I think we've covered loads of ground here. I guess the final thoughts would be, for you anyway, when are you going to watch it next?
Probably. It'll probably be a bit of a gap now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've seen it quite a lot in the last couple of years. So I'm going to give it a break. I think what the film needs is a really good Blu-ray release with lots of extras and stuff. Like, the film didn't seem to have a massive box office success when it came out, but it got a massive following. Like, it's gone into, pulling a Quigley is, as you've noted, has gone into common parlance in the US military. It seems to have a broad following through the fact that the film has been frequently reshown on cable TV shows. It's on lots of streaming services. So I think it's a film that, and like a lot of the actors keep getting asked about it at different conventions and interviews and stuff. So I think it's a film that has a following, and I think it just deserves a better kind of re-release almost on some sort of home video format. So that's my feeling on it. I think it's a film that as a Western piece, I think it is a classic of the 90s stuff. A lot of the stuff in the 90s went down kind of a more serious route, like Unforgiven, which is brilliant. But it's one of those rare theatrically released films that really qualifies as a piece of adventure action. Like when it came out, Roger Ebert saying, "Oh, geez, there hasn't really been a Western for 5 years." Silverado.
I read
Pale
that
Rider,
actually. Yeah, that's strange. Yeah.
So it was coming at a time where there had been a dearth of Westerns. Then there was kind of a resurgence of them with, Dances with Wolves, Unforgiven, to an extent, you might say, Last of the Mohicans,
Maverick.
Tombstone.
When was Maverick out? 96?
Maverick is 93 or 4, I'd say. Yeah. 90, so like that early 90s, you've got a glut of them. As I say, Tombstone, the Wyatt Earp film as well with Kevin Costner. Yep. So there's a glut around that period. There's a glut of turning out television, TNT, westerns as well. Films with Sam Elliott, with Selleck, kind of in the mid 90s, and most of them are worth checking out. But theatrically, there's a dart then towards the end of the year of the decade. So I think it's one worth checking out if you're looking for an entertaining adventure piece, and that's it's definitely one of the best. Your final thought?
Okay, I would say it's flawed, but worth a watch. And if you're a Tom Selleck fan, I definitely think it's worth a watch because he's had his quippy kind of. I always find Tom Selleck quite like avuncular or something like that. There's kind of like, kind of a nice guy element to him. And I think, as I said, Laura San Giacomo, although the character I kind of have issues with, I think her performance is actually really good. So yeah, I'd say watch it, but I wouldn't watch it 25 times like yourself, but I would definitely say watch it. It is a beautiful looking film.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you very much for listening. You can contact the show by emailing to extrareal@gmail.com. Search for the Extra Real Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can listen to the show on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere you get your podcast from.